last time I checked, Meghan is not dropping bombs on people. Yet there is way more coverage and time spent directing hatred towards her than people that are really, really hurting people.
I mean, the press is something you do get angry about a lot.
Yep.
And I suppose nowhere more so than on Israel-Gaza.
A lot of our newspapers want to keep us entrenched on islands of rage.
My guest this week is Misan Harriman. Now, Misan is a photographer, filmmaker, social activist. You will have seen him on Instagram or other social media platforms or possibly on stages, and he's very, very wide-ranging as a creative leader and as someone who believes he is helping create and build society in his social activism. Thank you for joining us. Misan Harriman, in what way would you change the world?
In what way would I change the world? I will make the vibes for the world moral clarity, to recognize that the status quo that we have today can be rebuilt for the better.
Explain.
So, if we look at the islands of entrenched rage that are powered by the algorithms that our doom scrolling is making us do, if we look at how much of the news media is very comfortable keeping us angry. But then you take a bird's eye view and you go to a protest, you go to a women's march, climate march, an anti-racism march, and you see average people really are doing their best to build bridges. You recognize that we can build community in a way that we are not today. And that's something that I believe is happening slowly and is not going to stop.
I mean, this is the way you live your life. And your life is remarkable because it has been transformed, I suppose, over the last, less than a decade.
5 years. From 2020.
You picked up a camera with no training and became one of the biggest photographers in the world. And you spend a lot of time on social media being positive. I mean, sometimes being angry and sometimes being outraged. But you are the sort of the social media activist as well.
Yes.
So how has that happened? I mean, how have you curated this extraordinary change in your life?
Well, certainly none of it was planned. You know, I got a camera for my 40th birthday for my wife. We were on our way to Rajasthan, and I took a whole bunch of awful images and didn't shoot too much until we got pregnant. And I had my firstborn who was premature. And I'll be honest, I hid behind the camera. The fear of being the custodian of something so delicate and precious as a very small baby. I took photograph after photograph, and as my daughter got stronger and healthier, somehow the camera helped me learn to love myself and my daughter in a way that I never expected. And the quality of the imagery went up. And a few months into that, George Floyd was killed. And I did not know what to do. And my wife once again said, look to your camera. And I went to the streets of London, not knowing if I would see 500 or 5,000 people. And I documented one of the biggest civil rights movements of our times. That's how it started. I had no followers on Instagram. I didn't know anyone in the fashion industry. But one day I woke up and my images had just gone completely viral because the son of Martin Luther King had seen my image. I presumed he thought it was somewhere in America. And all my mates started tagging me saying, that's Misan's picture. And then everyone saw it.
And what was the image?
It was of my now dear friend, Darcy Bourne, who is a field hockey player for England, holding up a sign saying, why is debating racism, even a point, And it was taken outside the US Embassy, 9 Elms Lane. And she almost didn't arrive there because of all sorts of reasons. So the paint's still dripping on the words. It's just, visual poetry that, serendipity allowed us to make. And it's one of the most shared civil rights images in the digital era. And the people of British Vogue saw these images and did something incredible. You know, they commissioned a then unknown photographer to shoot not just any cover, but in fashion, September is not a small deal. Yeah. And I shot Mr. Marcus Rashford and Adjoa Burr, the supermodel and activist in her own right. I shot both of them in the British Vogue big cover in the year of COVID and George Floyd, the year the world changed forever for many of us. And the rest, as they say, is history.
But you still document protests, social activism as a documentary photographer, and you shoot these amazing stars and celebrities and royalty and goodness knows what else. What is the thing that unites these two things in terms of your sensibility?
Well, I mean, the heroes I had growing up were people like Cecil Beaton and Gordon Parks, and Beaton, is known for his royal portraiture, but he did some incredible photography of the Blitz. And of course, Gordon Parks is a photographer, in my opinion, that had no weaknesses. And he did everything from shooting high fashion campaigns to the civil rights movements of, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And I guess I stand on their shoulders. I don't think it would be possible for me to just photograph famous people. I need to observe the human condition. And let's be honest, the world is on fire right now. And if many of us are not trusting of what the news media is supposed to be doing, then let me at least bear witness with my lens and let the people decide what they see.
What do you see that is different? What do you bring to it? What have you learned?
I think between the highlights and the shadows of a good image is truth. It's truth itself, I shoot quite cinematically with the lenses that I choose, but it's truth, So when you see the pain of the death by 1,000 cuts of being a person of color, and you see that in the protests on the streets, people react to it. I think when people see my images, it's not finger pointing. It kind of breaks down their walls of apathy and allows them to climb inside a different lived experience. And that's the work, because it allows people to walk in shoes that are not theirs.
But what you discovered very quickly, as well as your ability to take images, was your voice. And that's the thing that has really grown as well.
Yes.
You express yourself, you express your outrage and your anger and your hopes and your fears, and it catches on.
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
Well, I'm neurodiverse, dyslexic. I didn't do particularly well at school. My emotions are intrinsically linked to how I'm wired. So I have never been good at looking away from something that I think is unfair. And I think the only real difference now is I have a platform. So if children are being abused, if our climate is failing, if Mother Earth is dying in front of our eyes, if there are despots, having too much power and a billionaire class is using extractive capitalism to hurt us and our children's future, how on earth could I whisper about that? How? I have a platform, so let me bear witness and hopefully build community of like-minded people that are deeply concerned that maybe we're moving in the wrong direction and want to do something about it.
How are you building community, do you think?
Well, I mean, the borderless reach of the internet, right? If a family is dealing with police brutality or being stopped and searched too much or are dealing with a racist criminal justice system, they don't always get on the news. If I go and photograph them, their children, or protests, if no one cared, then I wouldn't have a profile. But when you see grandmothers from Norfolk caring, nurses, teachers, regular folks saying this is wrong. I posted a video of a black man playing a piano. I don't know if it was at Waterloo Station, and a guy just started heckling him, saying, "I wish you died." That's not normal. That kind of rage is unhealthy. So I bear witness so we can call it out and also do better. And actually, I believe this is how you build bridges, by recognizing the ills of our behavior so we can forge a better future.
But I think what's interesting about what you do is the sort of, the sort of concerned, memeable social media activist is a sort of a figure of fun, and is much mocked. But you've kind of done it for real, and you, as you say, you've built a huge following. And have you ended up sort of actually rather more optimistic about people as a result?
Yeah,
that the world is a better place than perhaps you thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you say I do it for real, I mean, look, I've been in tears in some videos that I've made, right? I've also been in awe of the humanity of some of the people. So it's much more than people just smashing their keyboards and having opinions. It's connecting with real people that are doing their best to swim upstream. And a lot of us are not politicians, or we're not worth 400 billion, but we are trying to say we can be better than this. And I don't think that should be a radical thing.
I mean, the other sort of astonishing thing about you is that you've gone into film, and your first short film was Oscar nominated.
Yeah.
That's not normal. And the after your film is this extraordinary piece of work. It's less than 20 minutes long, but it's instantly very, very emotional. And I think, again, it's the same thing. You've got some ability to be very emotional very quickly in a way that isn't necessarily cheesy or comical, which is a trap that people can fall into. So that is something about the way your brain is wired, isn't it?
I believe so. My wife always says that I don't do light. I don't think I'll be making any comedies anytime soon. Listen, The After is an observation on grief and the celestial nature of children and what it means for a man to really lose everything and be able to build himself back up brick by brick. It has a generational performance by David Oyelowo, who has become a brother of mine. I believe one of the great actors of our time. And it's what happens when post-lockdown, a group of writers, me, a great DOP, Netflix putting its trust in us to make some art and allowing us to do it. Fiona Lamptey, who was head of UK film at the time, really let us go for it. It's a hard film to watch, but it proves that if you put that out there, people will respond to it. And I never expected any awards, but here we are.
How much of this sort of sudden success is down to your privilege, if you like, and your connections and your childhood and the wealth? And tell us about your childhood for a start.
Yeah, boarding school from a very young age, straight from Nigeria to the English countryside in the 80s, which was, I always describe it as Harry Potter without the magic. It was a very traumatizing time, if I'm being honest with you, because privilege certainly doesn't protect you from being, one of very few black faces in places that were very comfortable, with overtly racist behavior, even in privileged spaces. In fact, the type of racism in privileged spaces is as dehumanizing as you can imagine. So,
give me an example.
Well, I mean, everything was colonial history, right? So imagine coming from a colonized country, and the private school system, especially in those days, was there to raise the next generation of people that come from the colonizers' heritage, right? So my history teacher was, I think Churchill was next to Jesus Christ for him, right? And there was no mention of any sort of Bengal famine or, the Mau Mau, or all sorts of other things that I've learned in later life. I remember a biology teacher looking at me and saying, "Harriman, sickle cell's a black disease," to the only black boy in the class. I mean, this is normal behavior. But you deal with it, and you code switch and you find ways to fit in. I was good at sports, that helped, but it certainly wasn't an easy time. And I think that's why I found safety and solace in the pages of books and in the video club, watching movies and, discovering amazing photographers.
So what was your life up to the age of 40?
Up to the age of 40,
was it much more conventional?
Conventional, worked in headhunting, in the city, but always there was that inner voice. And I always say this to people that ask me, how could you do this post 40? There was always that inner voice that that was saying you like the creative world, you love film, you love photography, you love theater, but also when you've not done well at school, you don't believe in yourself. And I had a huge kind of lack of self-love. And then I met my wife, and she fell in love with all the parts of myself that I was ashamed of. And there's something very empowering when somebody sees you and doesn't look away. And she placed a camera in my hand, and it's been a pretty crazy 5 years.
In terms of the things that motivate you, that get you going, on social media, I mean, how do you just respond to what you see?
Yeah, I never plan. Which is why I certainly don't have well-lit videos. There's usually kids are asleep or just finished a school run, heading off to London. What if I feel, if I'm moved by something, I'll talk about it and people will respond to it. So I think there is an authenticity that is very different to the influencer perfection, where so many influencers seem to have all the answers. I'm like, listen, I'm a middle-aged dad that's just trying to figure it out.
But if it essentially began with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, what has happened on that journey?
Well, I mean, George Floyd, for a lot of Black people, we've seen a lot of George Floyds, but what happened is we were all stuck at home in lockdown and had this moment of deep retrospection. And we couldn't hide anymore, so our traumas climbed out of us. We're all very raw. And to see this man lying in his own, asking for his mama, while still calling the police officers that were murdering him, sir, it was a lot. And to see the wave of performative allyship that's happened since then, which is of course going backwards because lazy terms like woke are used to blanket, just cover any sense of kindness or gentleness, which amazes me. But here we are. But it set me on a path of trying to build bridges with the art that I make.
What do you mean by performative allyship?
Well, I mean, everyone was, talking about what we're going to do about diversity and inclusion. I was invited to all sorts of panels and talks for a year. But I always said to the banks and the big consultancy firms that were getting me to talk during Black History Month, how's your board? Show me your board. Show me your leadership team. Where are the women? Where are the brown people? Where are the queer people? Where are the Black people? Because you wheeling me out, if everything there looks the same, if your head of HR isn't casting that net further afield, and it's not about there not being talent out there. Look at me. Why did it take 104 years for me to be the first Black man to shoot the cover of British Vogue? Black men have been holding cameras for a long time. James Barner, one of the greatest photographers in the world, is in his 90s. Ghanaian man. So the talent is there. Give the talent a chance. That's all we're saying. If they're not good enough, they're not good enough.
Well, how much do you think has been achieved since the death of George Floyd and the outpouring that happened? And how much do you think is going backwards now?
I think he's changed. George's death has changed the world because it unlocked a new generation of activists. And I've witnessed things that I never thought I'd witness. I'm amazed and in awe of our youth, our younger generation. And I'm really amazed by a lot of older folks that have gone on a journey of unlearning. It's hard if you've lived in an echo chamber of confirmation bias and arrested development. You only play golf with the same group of people. You only hang out with people you went to school or uni with. You go on holidays to the same place. You just keep all patting yourselves on the shoulders without realizing that the world's bigger than your view. And maybe your view was shaped on a viewpoint that is just a small percentage of the real truth of our lives. So George Floyd has helped a lot of progressive people go on a journey. It's unlocked two generations of youth that are never going to look away and are trying to fix the mess that a lot of us have made for them to inherit. So yeah, I think it has changed the world. From corporations, of course, they have to do a lot more work, which they're not doing from what I can see.
Well, aren't they going the other way?
They are.
Because of Trump's war on DEI.
They are. They're kissing the ring and things are being deleted from all sorts of places.
People are dropping their diversity policies.
They are. But, corporations are living organisms. And I think if they want to survive, they have to recognize that their consumers are growing into adults and their viewpoint is very different to Trump's. So otherwise a new unicorn will come. Someone will build, you look at people are building profiles on Substack that are becoming massive, hugely influential. There are companies like Ben & Jerry's that are doing incredible things, suing their holding companies because they have moral clarity. It's already happening. So they need to think about the future, not just, okay, the wind's blowing in this direction, so let's go over there.
So when you see the government saying, oh, these sentencing guidelines that were actually set up by the last government to try and address the concerns that happened after the murder of George Floyd, we don't like them because of the dominant ideology of the moment. What do you think?
What could I possibly think?
But what do you think is going on?
I think we need to do better in actually making decisions that come from a place of moral clarity. Right is right and wrong is wrong, instead of decisions being made because of the change in political temperature. If we are electing people, I believe we should be electing people because they are the best of us, right? The whole point of a politician is that they're supposed to be the very best of whatever we've been able to build in our communities. And they have to make decisions that reflect that. If our political class are going to be working for the donor class, then the people will lose hope in them.
Because there are two things going on at the moment, aren't there? We have these two cultures operating side by side. We have a sort of a backlash culture, a new right on the one hand, and then you have the progressives on the other. I mean, are they fighting each other, or are they? But
it's more than that's very binary. It's more than progressives. They are regular. If you go to any protest, there are lots of just normal people that are beginning to feel that they have been sold something that isn't true, and they are now beginning to unpick it and want to build something. They don't know what they're going to build. Whether it's Brexit, where many of people I know that believed that leaving was something that was better from this country, they've had to just own up to it and say, listen, the newspapers and politicians were telling us things that made us feel this sense of pride. And patriotism is very dangerous sometimes because the right people can use that to make you make the wrong decision for yourself.
What does patriotism mean to you?
Patriotism means to me, where I'm most proud is when I'm in a protest and I see people that have listened to Mother Earth, when I see people that refuse to say that the only way to bring peace to what's happening in Israel and Palestine is to have children be annihilated, having limbs removed with no pain relief. When I see people that are saying, we have to find a way to have shared humanity. And when I see British people walking the streets, I march in the Palestine protests with something called the Jewish Bloc. And there's a guy there, Stephen Kapos, it's got to be 80 something, a child of the Holocaust. And when I see people like him and 3 or 4 generations of his family walking in arms with many Arab and Muslim men and women, I'm like, they're all British. This is who we are at our best. When I see after the far-right riots that we had, and we had, amazing protests, amazing solidarity. We had pensioners offering up their homes to migrant workers that have, been very scared. There are a lot of good people in this country, but a lot of our newspapers, a lot of the owners of our newspapers want to keep us entrenched on islands of rage. And the thing there's a C.S. Lewis quote, how does it go? I've known my anger for so long that she told me that her real name was grief. I think a lot of us are hurting right now. And if you're in that place where you don't know why you're afraid or angry, you can be manipulated. And I think a big part of my platform is to say, hey, regular folk, we're here. Let's do better. And we don't do better by screaming at each other and saying, you're wrong, I'm right, go away. And that's possibly why there's some kind of authenticity to how I move online.
So well, is there space for that online? Because, I mean, social media has now become generally so divisive.
Yeah.
Lots of people think it's a terrible thing,
Yeah.
and it's only feeding anger. But you're doing something slightly different on social media, which is slightly more gentle and together.
Yeah.
Is there really a space for that?
Gentle on to a point. Like if I'm angry, I'm angry. Like Balenciaga did a campaign with children that it was unacceptable to me, so I was angry. And everyone that followed me was also angry. It's about responding to things in a way. There's a Rumi quote: "Raise your words, not your voice. It is rain that grows flowers, not thunder." And in general, that's what my community is like. But we are also really inquisitive and on learning and unpicking things, right? So instead of saying that we know, I will post lots of informative historical things that may help people understand things in a different way. Now, the sad thing is that there are not many people doing that online. And that's a question you should be asking your colleagues and your community about who you're willing to platform. In the last 6 weeks, I've seen Nigel Farage on the major cover of the Evening Standard, the London Standard. And just yesterday or the day before, there's another major thing on the Times saying he's going to be, or he has a chance of being the next prime minister. He's being pushed by serious platforms,
He's the leader of the fastest growing political party in Britain.
Yes.
I mean, so he will be getting media coverage. Is that wrong?
Well, now you can say that, but you need to ask yourself, from his days in Russia today, right, to being put on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, there are, people that have normalized, and I find it astonishing how comfortably he was platformed by those that should have known better. From his time at boarding school, he's had views that have been well documented, and there are a lot of kinder voices that have never got that level of attention from our press. And that's a question you should ask your colleagues, why? Over the years, and we'll see how history remembers what has been normalized. And we live in the age where America has shown that if you normalize things, it doesn't matter whether you've had 34 criminal convictions anymore.
I mean, the press is something you do get angry about a lot.
Yeah.
And I suppose nowhere more so than on Israel-Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, all I'm asking for is for truth itself not to be a needle in a haystack. Nothing more, nothing less. It is odd that in the UK, everything is reductive and sanitized. And when Hind Rajab was killed, some of the reporting is just horrific. It's a child we're talking about.
Just take that case then. So tell me what it was about that story. Remind people what the story was and how you reacted to it.
I mean, Hind Rajab, I think Palestinian Red Crescent were called. She was on the phone. The ambulance that was supposed to be rescuing her was attacked. I think the people in that ambulance were killed. I don't remember the exact number of bullets that were fired into the car that ended up killing her, but it was over 300. And there were multiple headlines that some didn't even call her a child, right? Every use of sanitized language that would make you, if you were just on your morning train, you think, oh, some young woman may have been caught in crossfire, when it wasn't what happened.
So what do you think is going on with that kind of coverage?
Well, I think you being in the industry should be able to answer that to me better. I should be asking you what is going on, because I'm confused. As a civilian that doesn't work in the press, I keep asking myself why the reporting isn't just saying, the whole point is to hold powerful to account, regardless of who the powerful are. And if you can report using very specific language about Ukraine, yet the language seems to be very, very different when discussing Palestine, then people are going to start asking questions. I think that's just normal human nature. You literally have to just pull up how, if a hospital is attacked in Ukraine relative to a hospital in Gaza, something is very different.
But you're shying away from saying what you think it is. I mean, do you think it's racism?
I think it's a dereliction of duty. And is it Islamophobia? I don't know. Is it some kind of fear mongering? I don't know. But my point is, the British people need to know, because many of them are going to just stop believing what they hear from the news. And I think that could lead us into a very dangerous place. And I do believe that a lot of good people in every media business that are probably also too afraid to say what's going on. Some whistleblowers have come out. There have been articles that I've read that are interesting, but this is a bigger issue within your world and your colleagues.
I mean, you posted about Omar El-Akkad, who we've had on this
Yes.
program, and his book, and you said it had changed your life and the way you looked at the world.
Yeah.
Do you share his sense of alienation around the culture that you live in because of what's happened in Israel-Gaza?
I think that book should be in everyone's will and testament, that their children and their children's children should make sure they have access to that book. It's that remarkable a piece of writing. Omar El-Akkad, he has a gentle cadence, and he's critical of everyone as well. He's critical of Arab nations. It isn't the sort of one-sided thing. And he's not angry, but he's honest with pure moral clarity about the fact that we're living through a time where truth has become completely unimportant in the way that we are being fed what's happening through a lens that is very, very angry. And to have this man who was raised in Qatar, born in Egypt, raised in Doha, and then in Canada, that's seen a lot, use his penmanship in a way that I couldn't. It felt like he was completing some of, where I get stuck with my frustration, I was just angry sometimes. He just continues writing and explains that, no, Misan, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you getting upset at children. I'm ambassador for Save the Children, at children getting killed at this industrial scale. It's not normal for you to think you should just get on with life. And but he uses the kind of words that, you've interviewed him, that I think a lot of people need to hear, that can lead them on a journey of understanding what an industrial war machine is, what imperialism and colonialism has left us in the age that we live in today. And he does it beautifully.
What do you think your kind of activism is achieving?
I think I'm just one voice, but I hope I'm a voice that helps people build bridges. I'm not someone that looks down on people that have had, for example, with a lot of people with the far right protests that happened last summer, we shouldn't look down on these people. A lot of those people have very valid points, and they're angry for a reason. We should engage with them. A lot of people don't feel listened to. So instead of saying, oh, they're just racist, no, they're scared and a little bit angry, maybe. Cost of living crisis, unemployment, maybe a lot of crime in their region. Maybe they don't have a lived experience where they would understand what an Arab and or Muslim or Indian, whoever African person is like, and they've been told to fear what they don't know. But listen to them, build a bridge with them, walk with them, talk with them. I lost someone very close to me in 2005 in the London bombings, Anthony Fatai Williams. A lot of us in the Nigerian community know and love him. And I'll be honest with you, I had a choice. I was in my 20s, and I could have, the news media was telling me to blame everything on the violent Arab man. But I decided to go on a journey and understand why anyone would strap themselves with dynamite and do such a thing. And of course, it led me, those men were not practicing anything close to Islam. Never. They had gone to another place. And it led me to imperialism. It led me to Tony Blair. It led me to both the Bushes, actually, to understand how this cycle of violence just creates more and more violence. And that's my frustration, whether it's with Israel-Palestine, in my country, in Nigeria, we have Boko Haram. You can't bomb for peace. What is going to happen to the boys that haven't been named that become men?
You see, some people will listen to you say that and say, oh, what, is he excusing terrorism?
No.
He's saying he understands why somebody would strap a bag to themselves and blow themselves up.
No, I think I'm excusing letting rage bury me so I could become violent. This is what happens, right? It's a primal rage of men. If something like that happens, I lost someone I loved to a terrorist, right? But I need to understand that terrorist was once a boy, a baby. What journey did he go on? He wasn't born a terrorist. You see, we just label and label and label. We need to look at the roots of these things and understand how it happened. And that's what I did, a little bit of critical thinking instead of just more rage. Stay angry, Misan. Stay angry. Let's keep you angry. And I think this is what we need to do, is look at the root cause of this. Because if we just are happy with a cycle of violence, guess what's going to continue? Violence. And those that will suffer most in the violence are children. Always children suffer most. And the work I do with Save the Children, I see it. And it's something that we can do better than that.
I mean, you're talking about sort of building bridges in a T-shirt saying more blacks, more dogs, more Irish.
Yeah.
That's a provocation, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. How well do you know your history?
Well, I know what the sign comes from.
So it's a history lesson to remind us that within our lifetime, this sign, the opposite of this sign, was very real. So it's a provocation for those to, people walk up to me and say, I don't understand, more, what is that? They didn't even know. Yeah. And I was like, no, these were signs outside by landlords.
We should say to anyone listening who doesn't know, there used to be signs outside the houses. My parents used to go to houses they were trying to rent, and there would be signs saying no blacks, no dogs, no Irish.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have a bridge building conversation where I'm educating them that within 30 years, this happened. And then they go on their own journey just to think, because a lot of people are in bubbles and they're floating around their own experience, not even thinking about that. So it's provocation to learn, provocation to prod and think about our collective past. And that's a big part of what I do, even with this T-shirt.
We talked about some of the celebrity photography you do. You also became famous for photographing Meghan and Harry when they were having a baby, and you've done other royal photography as well. You're close to Meghan anyway, aren't you? Because you knew her before she was royal. What do you think is going on with the hate against her now?
Yeah, wow. Well, thanks for asking me, because a lot of people don't even ask about Meg in that way. She is a sister to me, someone I care about deeply, and her beautiful children and her amazing husband. But the industrial and very focused hate machine that I've seen, I've experienced myself due to my proximity to both Harry and Meghan, has been extraordinary. And what I would say is that, one day, her children will be adults and it'll be impossible to protect them, right? From the ledger, and it is a ledger of hate that mainly the British media has been responsible for. And what I mean by that is, last time I checked, Meghan is not dropping bombs on people. She's not annexing nations. She's not a pedophile. Yet there is way more coverage and time and words spent directing hatred towards her than people that are really, really hurting people. And I do wonder how history is going to remember those that held the pen and the microphone and kissed their kids goodnight at night and paid their mortgages off the back of focusing hatred to one woman that most of them have never met. I do wonder how history will remember those that knowingly did that for the sake of the combination of misogyny, misogynoir, greed, being part of a system that they were just like, well, I was doing what my editor told me and not caring. I do wonder how history will remember.
I mean, when you say you've experienced it, what do you mean?
Because I've had people send me DMs saying, unspeakable things that they would want to do to her, her children, her husband, myself, unspeakable things. And you have to ask yourself, how did we get here? If you don't like her That's fine. If you don't like the things she puts out,
The TV show.
write an article saying you don't like it. But 24 hours focused hatred on this one woman, this mother, this human being, this soul, it's unforgivable. And there is a bigger issue. I saw Millie Bobby Brown did an incredible video. Same thing. Women were pulling down Millie Bobby. Why? Writing about her like she doesn't have a soul.
I mean, people will always say, well, look at what she's done, look at what she's said, that they are culpable in some way too.
Well, as I said, has she dropped a bomb on anyone? Is she a paedophile? Because the level of rage is as if she had. So look at what she's done. What has she done? Because there's a big disconnect with this. It's industrial scale.
So how do you explain, your view of the world and lots of good people out there alongside that?
Well, because it's always a small group of people that can get larger groups of people to go the wrong way. And if you look at the ownership structure and how hate pays in terms of the advertising model of media, the good thing is most of our youth, under 25-year-olds, they don't buy that crap. They're not interested. They're on their own journey.
But do you think, for everything you've said about building a community online, do you think it is worth having this thing, these social media platforms that are also, weaponizing hate?
Well, it's a tool, right?
And amplifying it.
It's how you use it. It's a tool, and I think.
And you're fighting the good fight, literally, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But do you think one is worth the other?
Well, look, if we are here with this information superhighway, and it's not going away. So now we have to curate our experiences and recognize that we can't expect those that built it or those that have the loud voices to necessarily have our best interests.
So what's your advice to people who are going, I sort of hate my social media because it's full of hate? How do you make it better?
Curate. The weaponization of mediocrity that is a lot of social media is because the loudest voices, the algorithms are so toxic that they find you do the work. You look for voices and recommendations. And it happens organically, but if not, ask for recommendations. Keep it away from anyone under 16, I would say. Like, no phones, in my opinion. I don't know if you've seen Adolescence, Stephen Graham and Philip Berrettini's masterpiece, which is, phones are scary for children that are not cognitively ready to deal with this sea of potential bullying and misinformation that leads to incel culture or the Andrew Tate of it all.
Yeah.
But it is also, we have these hyper devices that can help us unlearn history, help us really, really be inquisitive and become climate activists and become people that, want to build community in a way that is borderless and powerful.
Do you think it is an unmitigated bad for children, though, given you've talked about being neurodiverse and being dyslexic? Mightn't the phone be quite good for that brain?
Well, I think software is good. So there are things you can use when you're reading something, but the social media is different from a phone. Social media is what I mean.
Yeah. So keep kids off social media, but not necessarily.
They can have a tablet or
a
a device that they can use things for school, and that's what I mean. I'll correct that. But social media, no way. I'm sorry. I don't think kids under 16 should be on social media of any type. I'm sorry. And I grew up, I'm 47. I grew up without, as a kid, it didn't come till I was about, I think, 18. I got Facebook, or maybe 19. So I had all of that without it. So that's what our kids should have.
How debilitating was it for you as a child, being neurodiverse?
Oh, neurodiverse. I can't spell at all. So if I write a sentence, I think Krish is a bit of a ledge, it would probably say, I think Krish. And my head will think I've written the rest. So, of course, any written exams, forget about it. It made me feel like there was something wrong with me. And now, again, technology has allowed me to use apps like Grammarly and certain AI apps that really just give me a bit more confidence. I use voice notes a lot to communicate, and those are transcribed really well now. So it's a lot easier now than when it was when in the old days when it was pen and paper. That was not the medium for me. And I guess, especially my younger schools, teachers in the 80s and early 90s were not trained. You were just a bit dim, you were just, there's something
written off.
Yeah, written off pretty much. And it's tough for parents because parents need to listen to teachers. And now we're so much more informed in all of this. And I really speak openly about not just my neurodiversity, but like anxiety and what that does to me, how sound sometimes affects me, how I tap my feet when I'm nervous, all kinds of little tics that, when people see me as someone that's successful, I want them to know that, listen, I'm just as scared as onshore as you all are. And I'm just doing my best. The last thing I want to look like is some kind of superhuman person that grabbed a camera and everything just happened.
So what would 15-year-old Misan have believed what you are now?
No. And if I could speak to 15-year-old Misan, I would say, you're enough. And you've always been enough. And I certainly didn't think I was worth a damn thing at that age.
And how do you see things now for you? I mean, you've got this sort of multi-platform world, film, social media, photography, advocacy. Where's next?
We've made a very important film. Andy Mundy Castle has directed a film about my life and about activism and what it means, very similar to what we've been talking about, what it means to be an artist, that in the age where apathy pays, what it means to refuse to look away. We've been shooting that for over 2 years, and it will be premiering over the summer, I believe. And I can't wait to share that with the world. It feels like the world really needs that. And then I have this amazing working relationship with David Oyelowo, one of the great, actors of our time, who we plan to have a long-term director-actor relationship. So we have 2 films in development that hopefully we can start shooting one this year. And with the photography, I'm lucky. I'm in a place where I choose what I do. So I'm at as many protests as I can be. I'm doing some work with the prison system. I've got an exhibition this Thursday about Black children with Down syndrome because they're invisible. These beautiful, beautiful souls, the very best versions of us. I don't know if you know any Downs kids, but they're just pure light. So I'm supporting that charity.
So finally, I mean, what would you say to somebody who's kind of listening to you and thinking, God, it's a lot of work, this, it's a lot of, not work in the traditional sense, but it's a lot of emotional investment in a lot of really tough stuff. Why is the kind of activism you do worth it?
Because when you sit in a park bench next to someone that looks different to you, that has a completely different lived experience, you end up engaging with them and you realize that they have the same hopes and fears as you do. They want the same for their children as you do, and they're not so different. That's how you make this world gentler. When you don't do that, and you immediately see someone wearing a hijab as someone that you just could never understand, that's how they keep us on these islands of rage. And what I do is try and bring people together in a way that isn't finger pointy, that feels organic, hopefully, and we can try and look toward the horizon together. I don't think that's complicated. And I don't think it takes a lot of emotional energy, actually. It's just community building without being told that you should only stay in what you know as your community. I don't think that's complicated.
Misan Harriman, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir.